against Donald Trump. But also, the really worrying thing, as the Wall Street Journal pointed out in a really great editorial yesterday, was he wants to close down the investigations that have been started on the deep state corruption in the 2016 election. So they made the point that the declassification that President Trump nearly did, he said he would do it and then it didn't happen, that needs to go ahead. And then they further made a point, which I really want your take on, Sarah, which is that, I'm just quoting from the Wall Street Journal here, Mr. Trump should revisit his decision, the decision to renege on the release of the documents, and help Mr. Nunes and House Republicans finish the job in the lame duck session of revealing the truth about the misuse of intelligence and the FISA court in the presidential
100%. The president needs to revisit this. He had made the decision to declassify both the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. That was the warrant against Carter Page. That's what the FBI sought to spy on him. The 302s, Bruce Orr's 302s, those are the interviews that the FBI conducted with Bruce Orr, and those are very detailed. And most importantly, Steve, most importantly is the Gang of Eight notebook, the Gang of Eight dossier, because according to the sources that I've spoken with, that really lays out the exculpatory evidence that was left out from the secret court. So the secret court was denied information. We already know that they weren't told about Hillary Clinton. It was a footnote. That the fact that she had paid for the dossier, right, through Fusion GPS. So Mark Elias, the same firm in Broward County, right, the same attorney, was behind.
Perkins
I know, it's
Coie.
crazy.
I know, they're everywhere.
Okay. It's like they're all
Can
over
I just
the
ask you
place.
just quickly, Sarah, do you know why he went back on the decision to release?
I think I do. There was a private meeting between, and this has happened quite often, Rod Rosenstein, and remember, this is before he found out, and all of us found out, that James Baker had said that Rod Rosenstein wanted to wear a wire on the president and record him and invoke the 25th Amendment, that's what he had heard from Andrew McCabe. What had happened was Rod Rosenstein went to the White House, and people at the DOJ began pushing back against the president vigorously saying, look, if you release these documents, I mean, it's going to look like obstruction. You're going to hurt the Russia case that's going on right now. And then he had some calls, apparently. Apparently there were calls from allies. Now, what I was told was that they just went directly to the Department of Justice. The allies called there. Rod Rosenstein warned the president, look, we've got Great Britain and Australia. They don't want you
That
to...
sounds like the deep state sort of fighting back.
Absolutely, because we
But he's
know.
got to. Do you think he will overturn it? Just very quickly.
I absolutely do. I think the president should, and I think he will.
I think that's what. Tammy, what's your take on all this?
Yeah, look, over the next 2 years is going to be the kind of rhetoric, lies versus transparency, and revealing records like this. It's going to be a series of Kavanaugh-type hearings. They're going to make things up. They're going to make false allegations. The American people won't like it. But in the meantime, you've got the politics of that. But the president's interest is, in fact, helping the country. And one of the things we've learned that we never would have known if anybody else had been elected is the kind of corruption at the FBI that was unfolding. And that wasn't new, that it had to have been of course, ongoing, and that it just simply became apparent to us. So part of his promise is to help us back up onto our feet, off of our knees. And declassifying those documents is going to be key to doing that because, look, it's the Department of Justice. And this is an argument for Trey Gowdy to be considered seriously, considering his knowledge of the investigations that have gone on in the House, for him to become Attorney General, because we've got to be able to continue this, because this is part of us getting up out of the hospital bed.
Very interesting. Thanks, Tammy. I'm sorry, not much time, Charlie. Quick.
The Senate, we still control the Senate. Why not, Senator Burr? It's all up to you. Why don't you do these investigations like the House did? You cannot let this die. There's so much corruption there, and as Sara Carter has been following this hourly.
I know. Sarah's our expert. Thank you, Tammy. Great thought from Tammy on Trey Gowdy. And one last thing. If you want to know what Sarah's been doodling on a picture of Adam Schiff, which is terribly interesting, follow us on Twitter at Steve Hilton X, at NextRevFNC. That's a real tease. Find out what she's been doodling. You'll enjoy it.
Democratic lawmakers already critical of President Trump's acting Attorney General, Matthew Whitaker, been on the job less than a week. Democrats calling for his immediate recusal from the Mueller investigation, despite claims from the White House that the president hasn't even discussed the probe with Whitaker. With that, we bring in our talk radio panel. John Hancock, St. Louis, Missouri. Tom Hartman from out in Portland, Oregon. Tom, first start with you. worth Democrats at least giving this guy a chance?
Hey, Leland, great to see you again. No, the Constitution specifically says that you have to have Senate confirmation before somebody can become Attorney General. Jeff Sessions was a federal prosecutor. He had to go through through Senate confirmation for that, but he had to go through it again to become a member of the cabinet.
Tom, the Vacancy Acts allow the president to appoint somebody into
not
an
for cabinet officers.
Inactive position.
Not for cabinet officers. If that was true, Jeff Sessions would not have had to go through a second set of hearings.
Well, no. For cabinet officers, if you can appoint somebody to be an acting
Jeff Sessions
member.
had the exact same previous federal prosecutor.
Put this aside. Nancy Pelosi didn't talk about that. That's not the talking line from Democrats. If you're saying somebody should recuse themselves, then you're effectively saying
well,
that we
speaking to what
acknowledge
Nancy
they're in the
Pelosi
job.
is saying. Speaking to what Nancy Pelosi is saying, I agree with her. Number one, our grifter-in-chief president has hired a grifter who is under investigation by the FBI to be in charge of the FBI. I think that's a consideration that Americans should be thinking about too, or a concern.
Pick which argument you want to make, but John,
I'll take them all. I can walk and chew gum.
The question remains, John, for Republicans, how do they respond to this?
Well, this is great news to see the Democrats behaving like this right out of the gate. You know, this is precisely why Donald Trump won the election in 2016. The overreaching,
he lost by 3 million votes.
Extremist rhetoric. He's the president, my partner, and you know, this is the way they're going to behave for the next 2 years. And I think that bodes very well for 2020. Look, Matthew is going to be
upholding
the
the Constitution. There's something wrong with that?
Let's see what happens. Everything's a constitutional crisis to you guys.
Then what's right about putting a guy who's being investigated by the FBI in charge of the FBI?
Where'd you find this guy, Leland?
John,
where'd you find this guy?
It is a legitimate question. The president knew whoever he was going to put in this post as acting attorney general was going to get unbelievable scrutiny. Why open him up? Why open it up to such question to have somebody who has reasonable people can agree a checkered past?
You're not going to find anyone in the legal community that hasn't opined on the special prosecutor one way or the other. Let's give this man a chance to do the job, and let's see what happens. I don't think Robert Mueller is going to be fired. I think that would be a mistake. And nothing's going to get covered up here so long as the Democrats control the House of Representatives. They'll have hearings. They'll bring people in. The American people are going to know exactly what happened with this investigation, and I think they're going to know it fairly quickly.
All right,
but Whitaker's being investigated for bilking veterans out of their life savings. Doesn't that count for anything?
Go ahead, John.
Oh, look, let's give the man a chance to do the job. And I think we'll be very pleased with the kind of work that he does.
Well, so far at least, Republicans seem okay. I haven't heard any Democrats who are pleased. Tom, John, appreciate it, guys. We'll have you guys back when we got a little more time.
Thanks, Leland.
Thanks,
you bet,
John.
I think he'll do a very good job, and we'll see what happens. But I will say this, Matt Whitaker is a very highly respected man, and you didn't have any problems with Matt Whitaker when he worked for Jeff Sessions.
Well, President Trump's standing behind Acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker. This has 18 state attorneys general sign a letter calling on Whitaker to recuse himself from overseeing the Russia investigation. Let's bring in Alan Dershowitz, Harvard law professor emeritus and author of The Case Against Impeaching Trump. Well, Alan, you've heard the conversation that the country is having right now. You've heard the critics. You've heard the support of the president. Where do you stand here?
Well, a number of these attorney generals are people I know and I have a lot of respect for, but I think this particular petition is somewhat hypocritical because what they want is for the investigation to be conducted by Rod Rosenstein instead of Whitaker. Rod Rosenstein is much, much, much more subject to recusal than Whitaker. Rod Rosenstein is a witness. He's the one who wrote the letter. According to the book Fear, actually it was maybe his idea initially to fire Comey, and that's the main subject of the obstruction of justice investigation. And so you have a man overseeing the investigation who is a possible subject or target and certainly a witness of the investigation, and yet none of these state attorney generals are calling for his recusal. And so I think you have to look at both of these people, Whitaker and Rosenstein, and ask yourself whether Rosenstein should be involved in this investigation at all. The matter of Whitaker is, controversial and subject to dispute, but I think Rosenstein's recusal is not a matter of dispute. He should have been out of this case from day one. And of course, in that op-ed Whitaker wrote last year, he argued that, quote, any investigation into President Trump's finances or the finances of his family would require Mueller to return to Rod Rosenstein for additional authority under Mueller's appointment as special counsel. Here's what one of those AGs, Massachusetts AG Maura Healey, writes in that request by the 18 state AGs. Acting AG Whitaker's hostility to the special counsel's investigation disqualifies him from overseeing Robert Mueller. We are leading 18 state attorneys general in calling on Whitaker to recuse himself immediately. #protect Mueller. Where does this go? Well, first of all, Healy, who's a very good AG, leaves out the fact that Rosenstein has expressed real hostility toward President Trump. He said he wanted to tape him, that he might be subject to removal from office under the 25th Amendment. Look, you have to pass the shoe on the other foot test. If the arguments you're making against Whitaker are even more strongly applicable to Rosenstein, you can't just make the arguments against Whitaker. You have to make them equally strongly against Rosenstein. And I just think that unless you do that, it shows a real partisanship and political thumb on the scale. So I would hope that the state attorneys general would think very hard about whether Rosenstein, under their criteria, should be recused. And I think the answer to that is clearly yes, he should be recused. Very interesting. Alan Dershowitz, great to have you back on the program this morning. Thank you.
That's an untenable situation. And long term, that is disastrous for any country. People have to have faith in the rule of law being applied evenly across the board. What you're seeing is if we saw like someone just making it up as they go, as you see in Broward County, as you're seeing in Maricopa County, by the way, in Arizona as well, then if we had someone like Jimmy Carter overseas and he was in his day when he would observe elections in some third world country, Jimmy Carter would be on television reporting on what is something tantamount to a bloodless coup in another country. Well, we're seeing voting irregularities all across the board. We see uneven application of the laws here. We don't have faith in this voting process, the vote counting. That's what he'd be saying. But here it's happening with impunity. 855-40-LAURA. John Eastman, who assisted in the Bush-Gore fiasco in 2000, is going to join us to give us the latest on why this is so important for us to get right this time in Florida and beyond. Don't go away.
We are still counting ballots in Broward County.
5 pages or 6 pages for each of the people who voted.
But other counties have been able to do it.
But other counties didn't have 600,000 votes out there.
Well, Miami-Dade did.
Well, have you been inside Miami? Never mind. Let me go check. I'll check.
But it's a serious issue. It always seems like it is.
It's a serious issue with me.
You're listening to the Laura Ingraham Show, 855-40-LAURA. That's Brenda Snipes. And she's reacting to what is a lot of criticism of how Broward has been handling this post-election discovery of ballots and never seems to end. And it is a scandal that in the United States of America in the year 2018, we conduct elections this way. Joining us now is John Eastman. Of course, John, law professor, constitutional scholar, counsel on the American Civil Rights Union, previous lawsuit against Broward for failing to maintain accurate registration rolls. He joins us now to give us his sense on where things are going here and why this is so dangerous to the democratic process. John, tell us how you see this right now. We have Palm Beach County today saying they're not sure they're going to be able to make this Thursday deadline. of coming up with the final vote tally, and apparently they're still trying to deal with this recount.
Well, the most troubling aspect of this is continuing to find boxes of ballots that were not part of the initial canvass. And, you know, one of the reasons the American Civil Rights Union that I represent sued Broward County is because they don't take any steps to clean their rolls and remove ineligible voters. They don't take any steps to identify non-citizens who are on the voter rolls, or felons who are on the voter rolls, or people who have died in any other part of the country. And, you know, guess what? A lot of people in Florida have residences elsewhere in the country, and they don't even bother to check the death indexes of those counties.
Well, John, I also sense here that this is an extension of deadlines until we get the vote tally we want. Instead of what is the objective vote tally here? This is an attempt, as we saw in Maricopa County, with emergency polling stations open that only one side knew about. This is, again, it's like Brexit. Like, got to keep voting until we get the response we want, and that really erodes the public trust in the democratic process. At least how it plays out in some of these key states.
Well, you remember there was an Indiana House election back in the 1980s, and what they did is they got a bunch of provisional ballots and they segregated them into different piles. And then they kept opening each pile until the Democrat won, and then they said, okay, we don't need to count any more piles. They did the same thing in the Washington State governor's race.
Yeah, Maria Cantwell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they did the same thing with Al Franken beating Norm Coleman. I mean, this has now become part of the standard operating procedure, and it is election fraud. And anybody that says, well, there's no evidence of election fraud, we've got tons of election fraud. We've got people who are being registered to vote who are not eligible. We've got them voting. We've got them voting in two different states. Hell, we had a member of the running for Democrat House of Representatives in Maryland who was voting in two different states at the same time. You know, it's not some low-level functionary making a mistake. This is a deliberate effort to thwart the results of our elections.
Well, and when you have someone like a Brenda Snipes still in a position of power in Broward after having 8 years of Rick Scott, like, how is that possible? Doesn't it seem like there should be statewide norms for vote counting?
There should be. And, of course, the Supreme Court's 7-2 ruling in the Bush versus Gore decision, people forget it was a 7-2 ruling, said that Florida was violating the equal protection by having different standards for counting ballots in different parts of the state. My former associate dean, Tim Canova, who ran against Debbie Wasserman Schultz 2 years ago, filed suit against Brenda Snipes for all of a sudden coming up with all sorts of ballots, and then he said, "Okay, I want to see the ballots as you're legally required to do," and then she destroyed them in the middle of the lawsuit. So this is a problem that's been around for a while. I don't know what Florida law is on the appointment or election of county election supervisors to know whether Governor Scott had the ability to remove her or not, but certainly something ought to be done.
Right. She should have been removed for cause. I mean, there has to have been a way to remove her, but that was just a scandal. By the way, in Palm Beach County, John, let me just get in Palm Beach County, Susan Bucher, who's the head of the election commission there, says, well, if they can't finish the recount before the deadline on Thursday, they should certify the election results. Sorry, that's Barnett. Excuse me. That's Mike Barnett from the Republican Party. She said, we're working hard to finish by the deadline, but our equipment isn't designed to meet the deadline. And we've been complaining to the state for almost 10 years that they've never extended the deadline. We're making our best effort, she said. John, got about 15 seconds to close it out.
Well, you know, when you've got something like this, you hire some additional temporary people to come in and help you so that you meet the legal deadlines. I mean, this is a matter of law, and I keep hearing nobody's above the law. Well, certainly county election commissioners aren't above the law either.
John Eastman, we have to get you on TV this week. John, thank you so much for your input here. We really, really appreciate it. We have a lot more to get to on your healthy radio addiction. 855-40-LAURA. Stay there. If you or a loved one get leg cramps or foot cramps, you know how painful it can be, how disruptive they can be. Muscle cramps can jolt you out of a sound sleep or interrupt your daily life. Well, listen carefully, because I recently learned about TheraWorks Relief. It's a non-greasy foam that's proven to relieve muscle cramps fast and reduce muscle soreness. Plus, with daily use, TheraWorks Relief can even prevent muscle cramps before they start, so you can get a full night's sleep or do the activities you love without worry. TheraWorks Relief only takes minutes to apply, absorbs quickly, and it works. People love the results. You've probably seen Dr. Drew Pinsky on TV talking about TheraWorks Relief, and many of my colleagues on radio are also talking about TheraWorks Relief. Now, the holiday season is right around the corner, so if you know someone who suffers with muscle cramps or muscle soreness, I can't think of a better stocking stuffer. TheraWorks Relief is my choice for preventing and relieving muscle cramps. Make it yours, too. Get TheraWorks Relief today at Walmart, CVS, Rite Aid, and Walgreens, or by talking to your pharmacist. Learn more at TheraWorksRelief.com.
CNN stopped doing news a long time ago. They do Trump. And MSNBC is anti-Trump all the time. So when CNN started covering Trump, they were the first. They covered every speech he made. And then they made Trump the story. So Trump is the story in America.
Well, that's Larry King, of course, 25 years with CNN. Legendary broadcaster, interviewer, and he's on RT